Well, welcome to a new Harry's Garage, and this one is my annual roundup of the garage. The costs involved in running all these cars and a few more, insurance costs and what all the restoration work has done. Behind Charlie is the little Fiat Cinquecento, and that's new engine in that. He'll be talking about his GR Yaris because we've had some issues there as well. And yeah, there's quite a lot to get through with a garage of this size. I'll also explain why there's two Range Rovers in here that aren't normally in the garage, but that is for later. Let's kick off at this end with the McLaren. The two bikes, I ought to just quickly mention the CBX and my H2 Kawasaki. No costs with those. They're the great thing about bikes. I don't use them that often, but they just start on the button and I just have an hour, 2 hour ride on them, put them back in the garage, and I just love those. I've had them quite a while now as well. But what we're going to talk about is the McLaren. I've done that video, an update on the 650S, and we talked about the service at V Engineering and stuff. It's just interesting the comments on that video, because a lot of you picked up on the corrosion on this side and the fact it wasn't rectified when I bought the car. That was my choice. I used it as a negotiation thing. I knew about them. Lots of McLarens you look at have this issue. So do Ferrari, so do Aston Martin. It's as part of sort of hand-built supercars. They don't have the same sort of rust protection that you might find on a normal production car. Same thing actually with 911. They're very well protected, but they're almost a mass-produced car. These cars that are produced in tiny numbers with sort of specialist panels. If I could, I've got a 675 LT, that's got a carbon fibre wing. It just goes with the territory. And I wanted to do it with my people in my own time. I did not want it going off for 2 or 3 weeks, getting that repaired in the middle of June when we were just about to set off the south of France in it. So that, just wanted to update there. But the costs on this car, well, the service cost was 1,022. I actually put new tyres on it and I went Pirelli P0 Corsa, and I chose that tyre as a more aggressive tyre than perhaps the regular P0, and it was a new generation tyre. They're quite expensive actually, £1,770 for the tyre, so that's the costs on that. Next comes the Jaguar Project 8. Hasn't done a huge amount of miles in this year. We didn't do that sprint event down at Goodwood. I was away at the time. I wish they ran that sprint in a more friendly month. They do it in March, and the weather can be a bit iffy in March. I want to enjoy that car in June, July, but I suppose the track is busy with other things. But yeah, when we do take it out, we have great enjoyment with it, but I did have it serviced. And the service cost, it was a 48,000 mile service. It has not done 48,000, I think it's about 18,000 miles. And that was £843, and that included changing the brake fluid, this crazy expensive brake fluid they put on the Project 8, and diff oil as well, and a general look through. Now, there is a rattle from the rear suspension. I asked them to investigate it, and they thought there was an issue. Rear top arms need replacing, and they suggest £2,141 for the replacement. And at the front, they say the top suspension ball joint is worn, £2,627 for that. I did not get that done because I just want it investigated with Spires. They put it into this track mode. They're super expert on Project 8, and I want them to have a look at it. And if it needs doing, well, I'll get them to do it. The other thing noted on the service was the brake pads, 5mm remaining on the pads at the front, £1,602 to replace, and the rear pads, similar sort of wear, £1,176 to repair. Yeah. Bit of an eye-opener. That's the thing with carbon discs. The brake pads are expensive. I will get them done in due course though. Now, turning to the Project 7. I was hunting everywhere for the service invoice for this car. Couldn't find it. Rang up Marshall. I said, well, could you send me the Project 7 service for this year? Sorry, we never serviced it. I forgot to get it serviced this year. The main thing it did this year was that trip to Mallorca or Spain, and we did that road trip in it. Good as gold as normal, but I'm just thinking what to do with this car. I did put tyres on it as well before that trip. I think they were £910 P0s on it. It strikes me with everything that's going on at Jaguar, they're going to reduce the number of dealers, they're going all electric. Do I continue to get these cars serviced within the Jaguar dealership? The Project 7 is 10 years old next year. And perhaps do I go to a specialist? And I've been looking around. Tom Lempford will obviously be able to look after these cars. I think there's a real opportunity for someone. But I've also been talking to Lister. And Lawrence Whitaker up there did those limited run Lister 667 cars. And they tweak the engine and things. The last thing it really needs is more horsepower. But I'm intrigued by it. So watch this space in 2025. Do I add a load of horsepower to the Project 7 up at Lister's? To be continued. Jaguar XJ Coupe. Last year we were still messing around with injectors, gearbox issue, number of things. I am very pleased to report that 2024 has been just walk up to it, turn the key, go out for a drive on it. And here at Hull hasn't had a huge amount of use because there's been sort of new toys in the garage, but we have used it occasionally. Very usable, haven't been on any trips, maybe 2025 we will. Then the Countach, which is the complete opposite. That has been in permanent motion, this car, since 2024. It ended up going on that Spanish trip with about an hour's notice, if you remember, because of the issues, the Tesros that we'll come to in a moment. But yeah, Countach has just returned from a service up in Tesros. I collected it this week. They just did routine stuff. They went through all the suspension, nothing to report there. The only thing they found that happened on that trip, and I didn't realise, was the two drive shafts at the back. Apparently it shares the same drive shafts as the Porsche 930, and one of the clips holding a boot on had come off and it had flipped grease around. Fortunately, no wear, nothing damaged, but the drive shafts they just redid with new clips and things. So I haven't had the bill yet, but it's pretty amazing how many kilometres this has covered. In that, I think it's 4,000 kilometres in all that trip we just did to Italy, and then the one in Spain as well. So 7,000 kilometres in all, and it's been absolutely terrific. Now, there is actually something I also ought to mention on Countach, because I talk about the insurance I do on the garage, and we have in total 20 cars and 13 bikes on the insurance, and it has gone up this year. A number of reasons for that. McLaren to Lotus Emira was about the same cost. That really didn't make a huge amount of difference. It was actually the rise in value of a couple of cars, and that's the Countach and the Porsche 930S. They're just, some parts of the classic car market are fairly static or dipping. Others seem to be going up, and Countach is one of them. This is getting close to 800,000. One Simon Furlonger has just put one up for, and if this had been left-hand drive, it could be close to £1 million. Very different values. That's increased the cost of the insurance with Footman James, and it was £7,471 last year. This year, £8,450. And the other one, as I say, Porsche 930, we'll come to that in a moment. 930S, it's these specialist cars that have come from Sonderwunsch, these rarer Porsches. They are definitely under the spotlight at the moment, and I've had, considerable offers for that car. But anyway, Countach behaving good as gold, and we'll see what 2025 brings. It does need tyres, and they're coming in the new year, but that's for next year. Now, 2024 for the Tesros was meant to be a big year, but it didn't happen. And right at the beginning of the year, I knew I was going on this Spanish trip, and the idea was to take the Tesros, perfect for it, and we were going in February. And I just drove it out. We'd had a big service last year up at Foster's, £10,773 service, all the cam timing, all sorts of work done on it, went right through it. I took it out in January of this year, just on a dry day, no salt around. I could just hear the clutch release bearing. There was making a sound. Each time I press the clutch, you can hear a slight whirl, and anybody with old cars remembers this sound. And it's a complete pain, because it's a little bearing that when you press the pedal, it opens the clutch up, and they wear. And for whatever reason, this had worn its clutch release bearing that month. Whether it had been sitting there, had water on it, I don't know. I took it up to Bob Houghton, they looked at it, and they said, yeah, you really ought to get that repaired before you go on the trip. So it went up there, 24th of January, and we were, I think the cars were getting collected around the 10th of February, so a bit tight, and you have to take gearbox, all the back end comes out, you can keep the engine in situ, and I had the release bearing. And while they were in there, they noticed that the slave cylinder hydraulically that moves the release bearing had a slight weep on it. And they said, we ought to replace that while we're in there as well. So I said, okay, do the slave cylinder as well. They got new seals for it, the outer casing was fine, fitted it all, came back, test drove, all good, came up here, I don't know, let's say 6th of February, I'm guessing now, and the truck was about to come up here. I went round the back of the car just to check oils and things, everything was good. And I noticed a little pool of oil at the back of the car. I thought, I don't believe it. Pushed it forward. Yeah, it was this clear hydraulic looking fluid. I went to press the clutch and the pedal went to the floor. And it had drained all its hydraulic fluid and I had no clutch. Hence why, with an hour's notice, I mean, the Countach got pressed into action. Bob Houghton said that we're very, very sorry, we can't believe it, bring it in. They then took it all apart again and refitted seals into it. It must have been a 40 seal, and it did it again. Now, they'd got the parts from Hill Engineering, very well known, and they reported this when he says, we've just had a report from an Ferrari F40 that has had exactly the same components fitted, and that's done the same. There's been a change. Ferrari have changed the seal without letting anyone know. We're going to have to put a stall on this. And so the Tesros stood still while Hill Engineering re-engineered their slave cylinders for this seal that Ferrari had changed without telling anyone. Again, it's this spare parts behind the scenes with these classics are changing. They change supplier, and this is what happens. And good on Bob Houghton, they took it on the chin. The whole thing was free of charge, having to do it. It's 2 or 3 times they had to do it. And they also, the other thing it had done, I just remembered, was when it came back, I went just to put it on the trickle charger. Everything's on C-Tech chargers all through the garage. And the handle just didn't open the bonnet. And they had an utter nightmare trying to put a camera in to try and release the bonnet and then repair it. And that was all caused because they'd replaced the cable. It was one of the things they'd done on the service, replaced it, so it was getting worn. And that cable, the nipple just pulled off the end. Again, poor part supply from Ferrari. And so they now, if they get a new cable from Ferrari, they also add their own solder to keep the nipples on the cable. Shocking that you're paying a huge amount from Ferrari for these components that just don't work. Anyway, so now it has a bonnet on it. All of that meant the spend on the Tesros was £3,763, but it didn't get back to the garage until sometime in July. I had Goodwood Festival because we had the Espada down there, and then we went out on the trip with the McLaren. I tried desperately to get one trip in this car this year, and I thought, I'll go to Scotland, we'll go and do Scotland, but the weather just didn't quite do it. We ran out of time, so it's locked away again, and let's hope 2025 proves to be a lot better. Just while I mentioned the Espada is not in the garage. I actually swapped it for the Countach when I collected this from service. I've taken it up there because it's doing a really annoying thing. It is absolutely flying, but if you give it a really good run, and someone else will be driving, but perhaps going up a dual carriageway and keeping it 80, 85 miles an hour and using a lot of it gets fuel starvation. It's like the fuel pump can't keep up if you're really pushing on in it. So they're just going to investigate that with it. But the costs on that car this year was I had the roof redone by Prestige Refinishing. And yeah, I haven't checked the invoice. I seem to remember it was like £1,400 to do it, but it was just so much better than it was before. It's a slightly smoked panel. We've got rid of the sort of stainless steel rim around it, which I never liked, and it looked fantastic on the Cartier lawn at Goodwood. Couldn't have been proud of how that car looked. It was to celebrate Marcel and Gardini design, and in the pool of Diablos and Countach there, the Espada stood its ground very well. Now we turn to the Porsche 930S. Another car that was meant to have a really big year in 2024 because it's 50 years of Porsche Turbo this year, and I was going out to Germany. We were going to do all sorts of things. Visit Sonderwunsch. We were also going to visit Freisener, who did the restoration on this car, and also Roof, because I wanted to hear about the wheels and supplying them to early Porsche 930. So a whole load of things. And that's why I sent it down for a service early on in the year when it wasn't doing anything. February 28th, it went in for a service. And the other one thing, they were just doing a regular service on it, but it had an annoying feature, and that it was still running on. You could take the key out of this car, turn it off, take the key out, and it would continue running. And they do have a relay in the back that just keeps them running. That's for oil pressure around the turbo. But this was doing more than that. It just wasn't turning off. And Steve Winter at Jaguar Porsche said there was an issue actually with the ignition barrel itself, though it wasn't triggering something it should have, and it was needed a new one. And to get a new one, you give the chassis number to the Porsche factory, you have to send your documents, and you are the owner of this car. And it's a bit of palaver, but a new key barrel in the steering, and all that was sorted. Or so we thought. Charlie then went to collect the car, brought it back here, and it started to pop and bang, and it just wasn't running right at all. Very, very odd, because when it was with Steve, it seemed to be running okay. And it went straight back to Jaguar Porsche to be investigated. And they checked, and there was a fuel contamination. In the filters and things, there was a build-up of residue, and it was extremely odd. Where had this come from? It was happening beyond the filters, actually in the fuel head and the warm-up relay. And this is where I sort of know mechanical things, but it is very peculiar, the injection system on this car. And there's this warm-up relay, and it had failed, and it needed repairing. So it went off for repair, and they wanted to know what had happened with this fuel. Now, as you probably know, the garage, I've been running sustainable fuel from Corrigan. Sustain 80 fuel is what I use in all these cars. In total, I've just had a count up. I've used 14 barrels this year, so about 2,800 litres of Sustain 80 fuel. And I've got on extremely well with it. But what was this happening with this 930 and this contamination? So Corrigan went to test the fuel in it and discovered it had a very high water content, and it wasn't Sustain 80 fuel. We knew we'd run out, and we had filled it with super unleaded E5 normal pump fuel in it, and they tested the fuel, and it's an 80 litre tank in this, and they discovered it had 0.2% water, and normally you would only get 0.002 of water, tiny percentage water. This had the equivalent of basically a wine glass of water poured into its tank, and that water had got into the injection system, and the more Steve dug, it went into a nightmare. And the fuel head had little rust pockets within the injector mechanism. But it was because there was contaminated fuel, had come from somewhere, not from sustained fuel. They then came here and tested all the fuel in all the bikes, everything. Everything is zero water apart from this flipping thing. Somehow it had got water in the system, and it was just a nightmare to get redone. There's one specialist in the country who rebuilds the injection system on this. You have to remachine it because the injection system is actually a cast iron injection assembly. If it sees water, it goes rusty. So you've got to go right through it. And as I say, I took it down for a service 28th of February. It returned to the garage middle of October this year. That's how long this car has been out of action because of this fuel issue. And it's been so frustrating. We had to cancel all the trips to Porsche, to Roof, to Freisener Motorsport, and we're going to try and do it in 2025. But it's odd because I've actually used Sustain 80 fuel as a sort of maintenance fuel, winter fuel, storage fuel, because it has zero water content. You don't have the trouble we get with ethanol, and everything else starts on the button, everything's terrific. But unfortunately, as I say, somewhere it got some duff fuel in it. But it's a word of warning, if you're using outside pump fuel from somewhere that doesn't sell super unleaded very regularly, if it's got ethanol on that fuel, it will absorb moisture. And if it's been sat in the tank in a while, be aware. So only buy it from places that regularly churn fuel would be my top advice on buying pump fuel. Now let's turn to better news and the Zagato and the Rolls and things. All three cars here have been as good as gold. I can turn the key and go off. And the Zagato had quite an exciting year. It went up to Heavington Hall Concours, and I was amazed. I just went up there because it's such a good event, look after you so well, and there's always crazy things, Max and that Nissan Patrol and things. But it entered in the concourse, so it was on the lawn, elevated on the lawn, and it won a prize. It won Performance Car 1966, 1999. It won Best in Class or whatever, and I got a gong for it, and I was dead chuffed. And then we drove home. Don't trailer this car, it just works. It's hilarious fun to have it. So it's like a Porsche Mini is the only way I can describe the way it drives. It barks through those big Weber 45s, front wheel drive, just a bit of a hoot. I should say now, apologies to the Lancia Owners Club in the UK. They wanted the NEC on exhibit. I just couldn't do it. I was overloaded at the time. I was out of the country. The Countach was already going up, and I just couldn't get it organised, and I couldn't get down to their track day at Goodwood. Maybe we can do those two things in 2025. Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow, absolutely nothing to report. I get in it, I turn the key, and we go off places. It had several trips into London. It actually went to the Peninsula Hotel for a big event, I seem to remember, and had it valet parked and things. So yeah, doing Rolls-Royce things, and I still love it to bits. And I haven't done anything about the engine. It was interesting, all the advice. Had that little bit, it does burn a bit of oil. Do I rebuild the engine? I'm not going to do it. I don't think. I just carry on just using it as it is and the mileage we do. Another quick mention for my little Lotus Elan, which has got quite a lot of use recently because I like using it this time of year, but it had a habit of not starting when it was always good at starting. And I couldn't quite understand why it would. It's got luminescent ignition on it. I thought, oh, it's so simple. I built this blessed thing. I should be able to find out why it's not starting. I thought it was fuel pump issue. It wasn't. What I discovered was the distributor cap. At some point, there's a little nipple in the middle, so that feeds onto the rotor arm, and the bit of carbon in the middle had dropped out, and somehow it was still working. Then it must have been arcing between the top of the distributor cap and the rotor arm. If you know about these things, probably half my audience have no idea what I'm talking about, but it wasn't there, and it was having to arc, and I don't know how it was still working, but it was. Anyway, I discovered I had a spare, put one on, and it's been as good as gold since then. And now we get to the Fiat Cinquecento. Yeah, this is the big star of this year, I suppose. This is the restoration project we did down at Steph Perotti down there, and we redid the engine in it. And I'm very pleased to say it now has the 695 engine in there that looks almost standard, but most certainly isn't. Yeah, it was quite a journey, this one. We've used, I don't know how many 100 miles we've done it. We've probably run about 200 miles in it, something like that, on my second tank. And they're not very big tanks. It was quite a big build, this. I could have made my life so much easier with sticking to 595, but no, once I'd seen those 695 barrels, I thought, no, I'm going to go the whole hog. We're going to have a go at it. And it comes back, and it starts on the key, and all is good. But it was quite expensive. So in all, well, the parts invoice was 3 pages long, and that came to £5,360. And then we get to the labour charge, and they did quite a lot more. They did the gearbox mounts. They had to redo the drive shafts. The gearbox has been out. All the braking system was gone through. So all those hoses, all the drums have been off, shoes been out, and the new master cylinder went in it as well, because I wanted it to be as top notch as it could be going through it. And there was a wiring issue as well. And we ended up with doing all of that. The labour charge was £4,698. So basically £10,000 was spent on this car to get it to this stage. But it's mine, it's very personal. So me and my wife, we love Fiat Cinquecentos. It's a great engine. It seems to go really well. And let's see what 2025 brings with that. Now, There's a GR Yaris here, which you've seen before, and I'm going to pass over to Charlie now because he's had some interesting times with this car over the last couple of months.
Hasn't racked up a huge number of miles, 5,000 miles this year. This year's spend, we've had 2 front tyres go on, sort of 250, 300 quid. They were an absolute nightmare to find, the Pilot Sport 4Ss, but that was something that we found out after the experience of the service last year, and I'll get onto the service of this year in a minute. So we had Litchfield do the ECU tune and the Ecutech Bluetooth map as well, so that was 1,200 quid to go to 320 brake horsepower, so a big bump from the sort of 265 from standard, and that has absolutely transformed the car. And that was something that we did just before I went on the GR Yaris launch for the new car this year. So it was quite nice to sort of have the comparison back to back with those. And yeah, transformed it. It's an absolute brilliant thing. I honestly can't say enough good things about it. I've had mowers in the back. I've had full IKEA furniture, the whole car fitted out. It's just brilliant for that sort of van use that I sort of use it for. But yeah, my big gripe this year is Toyota dealers. The dealership experience at Toyota Cheltenham, specifically, has been absolutely awful. I wanted to speak to them about new Land Cruiser, absolute nothing back from them about new Land Cruiser. Then I phoned them up a few weeks ago and said, hi, I'd like to put my Yaris in for a service, no problem. We have availability in the next few weeks, fine. Gave them a reg and they said, cool, okay, I'll need a full service, that's 470 quid. I went, right, okay, fine. Pull up on the day of service and give them the keys, say, it's not one of those sort of while you wait services, so left it with them, and I get a call about lunchtime saying, terribly sorry, Mr. Metcalf, but we don't have the parts required to fully service your car. I went, hang on, what? You were the one who told me that it needed a full service. What's missing? Well, we don't have an air filter, we don't have the gearbox or the diff or the transfer fluids, so you're going to have to come back at a later date. I went, right, but you knew that I was going to have a 24,000 mile service because the service intervals on this are every 6,000 miles or annually. So you were the ones who told me that this was going to be needed. So we had a big sort of hoo-ha. And to sort of cut it short, I won't be ever using Toyota Cheltenham to service this car ever again. I cannot get over how poor that whole experience was, because I've had run-ins, what was it, not last year, the year before, where they forgot to plug my fan back in and the car almost overheated. So yes, that wasn't very fun. But overall, the experience of the GR Yaris this year has been absolutely phenomenal, and I love it to bits. And I do not feel at all the need to upgrade to the new one in this car's current form. Just think it's great.
Well, there you go. That's the story on the GR Yaris. I think Charlie feels better now, having said all of that. But I want to get to the 2 Range Rovers at the end. Why have I got my old classic Range Rover in and the 322 in? Well, you know this car very well. I'm amazed each time I do a video on it how much response it gets. And yeah, I've got a dilemma here, because I've got that classic over there and it really needs restoring, but I don't want 2 Range Rovers. This 322, I'm just looking at its history. We bought it in 2016. It was £13,500 at the time. It had done 86,000 miles. It's now sitting on 133,000 miles. I've done 46,000 miles in it over the last 8 years. And I went through the costs of it. What does it actually cost? Above servicing, it's had a service every year, which is roughly £500 each year for a normal service. So 3,500 for service. And then the repairs on it, well, early on, it did an alternator, but it was covered by warranty because I had a warranty when I first bought it. It's had the turbo pipes, inlet pipes, which is quite a common thing. That was £191. The rear wiper I replaced and had it replumbed in, £868. Rear brake discs on it, £341. And I had the exhaust gas recirculation valves done after I've had it for a couple of years, and that was £861. So the total cost of spares or repairs above servicing, £2,261. That's 5p a mile. With servicing as well, 13 pence a mile. Oh, and I've also this year put these tyres on it. Now these are from Pirelli, and I was just commenting how much I liked all season tyres, and these were just fresh out, and they actually sent me this set to put on this car. I thought I might do a roundup of this car next year and just see how they work. Because what I liked about these is that I'm a big fan of all-season tyres in general. I think they're a really good solution, but these have the snowflake on them as well. So they are almost a true winter tyre. All I can say, having run them in the summer, it's so much better than the standard Scorpion tyre you get on this age of Range Rover. I mean, it's nearly 20 years old, this, so there's a new generation of tyres and they are much better, smoother, handle. You do not ever think you're on a winter bias tyre at all. So that's my story there. So it's been as good as gold, but this classic Range Rover just tortures me. I actually bought this car in 1995. It had been with a previous owner for a few months, and then I bought it from HRN in London. And I'd gone in to buy another Range Rover, P38, didn't like it, knew within 30 seconds of getting it, I'm not having one of these, but they had this sitting in the showroom. And I thought, God, that looked good. The right colour, these wheels, all good. And I've been a bit of a fan of Overfinch. So I bought it, and then it went down to Overfinch. And this car has a 5-point-something litre lump underneath. It has all the Overfinch on here. It has all the double glazing. They do the seals around the window. It has all the suspension work on it. It has the quick steering rack. This is a soft dash car. And if I look in it, I just cannot get over how good the interior is on this car. It does not look as the age it is. So I know it needs restoring. It badly needs restoring. I sold it to my brother-in-law when we bought our first 322 in 2002. And he loved this car as well. But unfortunately, his commute was to the station. He worked in London. He took the train in every day. So this car, rain or shine, snow, etc. And it didn't really take to doing short journeys like that. And it's a little bit tired, to say the least. I actually had Kingsley have a look round it, and they looked at all the hours on it, and they quoted £50,000 to get it back on the road. That was in 2015. I just don't want to I don't want to go on another journey like the Jaguar XJ Coupe or the Zagato for something when I've got the perfectly good Range Rover like this. But do I sell this Range Rover and my Series 1 so I can restore and get back to where it always was, my 5-litre Overfinch, 320 horsepower, goes really well. And the thing about this Range Rover, we actually owned it at really exciting times in our lives. We collected the kids from hospital, the twins, in 95. When we were setting up Evo, this was my car at the time. I can remember going up there, spending long hours at the office, getting all the computer equipment in and things. We towed race cars behind it for Evo. I towed all sorts of things with it on the farm. Lived and breathed with this car. We had a place in Cornwall, always on family trips in this car. So very special to everyone in the family. So that is my dilemma for 2025. Please add to the comments what you would do. Is that a good idea? Do we do I just want to go, I would spend 15, 20,000 to get it back on the road, but I'm not spending 50, and I'm certainly not going to spend 100,000 on it. What do I do? How do I get it back on the road? So there you go. There is a garage roundup of 2024, all the costs, everything that's happened in this garage, all the repairs. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, there's another video coming after this one where we're going to go through 2024 on YouTube, how we got on with the channel, which are the top videos, least popular, where you're all watching them, all the facts and figures. So that's next week. But I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, keep watching, keep subscribing, more videos coming on very soon.